A question that changed everything. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you started questioning everything you thought you knew about culture, language, and even yourself? Maybe you have felt tired, stuck, or embarrassed while trying to learn English, wondering if you would ever sound natural. What if I told you that my journey of learning English did not begin in a classroom, but inside a love story that crossed oceans, climates, traditions, and fears? And what if that love story almost failed before it truly began? The strange thing about life is that it rarely gives you a dramatic warning before everything changes. Sometimes, it starts with something simple. For me, it started with a plane ticket and a nervous heartbeat. When I first arrived in the United States, I believed I came here mainly for work and a better future. I told myself, this is just a professional journey. But deep down, I was also running from something. I was running from the fear that I would never become confident speaking English, never feel like I truly belonged anywhere outside my comfort zone. The first thing that surprised me about America was not the tall buildings or busy highways. It was the silence inside my own mind. Back home, I felt expressive, talkative, and confident. But in the U.S., my brain suddenly felt like it forgot how to organize simple thoughts into English sentences. Scientists call this cognitive overload. When your brain processes a new language, it uses more working memory, which makes you feel slower and less confident. Basically, your brain is not broken. It is just working overtime without coffee. I remember my first day at work. The office looked modern and friendly. People smiled, but my anxiety translated every smile into pressure. Someone asked me, "How's your day going?" Such a simple question. In theory, I knew the answer should be easy. But my brain decided to panic. I answered, yes. That was it. Just yes. The conversation died faster than my confidence. Psychologists explain that language learning anxiety can trigger the same stress response as public speaking or social rejection. Your heart beats faster, your palms sweat, and your mind tries to escape. That was exactly how I felt standing there, holding a coffee I didn't even want. Pretending to understand jokes that traveled over my head like airplanes I forgot how to board. The climate also shocked me in ways I never expected. I arrived during winter in a northern state. The cold did not just touch my skin. It touched my emotions. Back home, warm weather often encourages outdoor social life. In colder American regions, people tend to stay indoors longer. Research from environmental psychology shows that climate can influence mood and social behavior. Less sunlight can reduce serotonin levels, which affects motivation and happiness. So imagine learning a new language while your brain is also negotiating with snow and seasonal depression. It is like trying to dance while wearing 5 winter jackets. During those early weeks, loneliness became my secret roommate. You might think loneliness only happens when you are physically alone. But the worst loneliness happens when you are surrounded by people and still cannot express your thoughts. I wanted to share jokes, stories, even simple opinions. Instead, I stayed quiet, smiling politely, hoping silence would not reveal how lost I felt. One evening, I sat inside my small apartment, staring at my phone, scrolling through messages from family and friends back home. I suddenly asked myself a dangerous question. Did I make a mistake coming here? That moment is important because many English learners face it. Studies from language acquisition research show that motivation often drops during the culture shock phase, which usually appears within the first few months of living abroad. You start doubting your decision, your ability, and sometimes your identity. But here is the twist. Something unexpected happened that night. Instead of opening a grammar textbook, I opened a notebook and wrote one simple English sentence about my day. Today, I feel lost but curious. That sentence was not perfect, but it was honest. And honesty is one of the strongest tools for language learning. Neuroscience research suggests that emotional engagement helps memory retention. When language connects to real feelings, your brain stores it more effectively. From that day, I started practicing English through storytelling. I described the snow outside my window. I described the taste of American coffee, which honestly tasted like confidence mixed with confusion. I described my fear of speaking and my hope of staying. Slowly, English stopped feeling like an academic subject. It became a survival language. Then, something even stranger happened. It became an emotional language. Looking back now, I realize that my journey was never just about grammar or vocabulary. It was about identity transformation. Sociolinguists explain that when you learn a new language, you often build a second version of yourself. At first, that version feels awkward and incomplete. But over time, it becomes stronger, sometimes even braver than your original self. And here is where the real story quietly begins. Because during this fragile stage of loneliness, confusion, and personal rebuilding, I was about to meet someone who would completely change my understanding of love, culture, and communication. I did not know it yet, but that meeting would challenge every belief I had about relationships. It would force me to learn English in ways no classroom could ever teach. And most importantly, it would make me ask a question that still defines my life today. Can love truly cross every border? Sometimes, the most life-changing chapters begin when you feel the most lost. Or to say it in simple English, sometimes you must feel out of place before you discover where your heart truly belongs. First steps into American life. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone seemed comfortable except you, and suddenly you became hyper-aware of every word leaving your mouth? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you were terrified of saying it wrong. That was exactly how my real American life began, not with confidence, not with excitement, but with a quiet battle inside my head every single day. My job in the United States looked perfect from the outside. The office building had bright glass windows, clean hallways, and a coffee machine that seemed to work harder than most employees. Everyone moved quickly but politely. They smiled, said good morning, and asked casual questions like it was part of breathing. Meanwhile, I was mentally translating every sentence like my brain was running outdated software trying to process a new operating system. The first week at work felt like entering a movie where everyone knew their lines except me. Meetings were the hardest. People spoke fast, used slang, and sometimes laughed at jokes I could not even identify as jokes. I would nod, smile, and take notes that often made no sense when I reread them later. Research in second language acquisition shows that real-time listening in a foreign language requires processing speed that learners often lack in early immersion stages. It is not about intelligence. It is about neurological timing. Your brain is trying to decode pronunciation, grammar, context, and emotion all at once. One morning, my manager asked if I could circle back later. I panicked internally. Circle back? Was I supposed to physically walk in a circle? I spent 10 minutes wondering if this was some kind of workplace ritual. Later, I learned it simply meant returning to the topic later. Moments like that were funny after I understood them, but at the time, they felt like small reminders that I was standing on unfamiliar ground. Outside of work, daily life was another adventure disguised as stress. Grocery shopping became a language test I never signed up for. American supermarkets were massive, bright, and full of unfamiliar brands. One time, I accidentally bought vanilla-flavored yogurt thinking it was plain. Another time, I spent 5 minutes staring at milk cartons because I did not understand why there were so many types: whole milk, skim milk, almond milk, oat milk. I remember whispering to myself in English, "Why is milk so complicated here?" That sentence became one of my favorite accidental practice phrases. Interestingly, psychologists explain that learning language through daily survival activities improves long-term retention. It is called contextual learning. When you connect vocabulary to real actions, like buying food or asking for directions, your brain builds stronger memory pathways. At that time, I did not know the science. I only knew that every mistake forced me to learn faster than any textbook ever could. The American communication style also surprised me. People were friendly but direct. They valued small talk, which I originally thought was meaningless conversation. But I later discovered small talk is actually social glue in American culture. Phrases like "How's it going?" or "Nice weather today" are not always deep questions. They are invitations to connection. Sociologists explain that these casual interactions help build trust and reduce social distance. At first, I responded with overly serious answers. When someone asked, "How's your day?" I would explain my entire emotional situation. Their confused expressions taught me quickly that sometimes, the correct answer is simply, "Good, thanks. How about you?" Language learning is not just about grammar. It is about cultural rhythm, understanding when to speak deeply and when to keep things light. The weather continued to shape my experience in unexpected ways. The winter felt endless. Snow looked beautiful in photos but felt exhausting in real life. Walking to work while cold wind touched my face made me miss warm sunshine from home. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a real psychological condition linked to reduced sunlight exposure. It can affect mood, energy, and motivation. I noticed that during darker days, my willingness to practice English also dropped. I wanted to hide inside my apartment, watch videos in my native language, and escape the effort of learning. But something small helped me stay motivated. Every night, I started recording short voice messages in English describing my day. I would say simple things like, "Today I talked with my coworker about lunch," or "Today I felt nervous during a meeting." Research shows that speaking aloud activates auditory and motor memory systems simultaneously, strengthening language acquisition. I did not sound fluent. Sometimes I sounded like a robot reading emotional poetry. But slowly, my pronunciation improved, and my fear of hearing my own English voice disappeared. Then there was the emotional part of adaptation. Cultural psychologists describe a stage called identity negotiation. When you live in a new country, you begin balancing who you were with who you are becoming. I noticed that I was becoming more independent, more direct, and strangely more patient. Living in America forced me to solve problems alone. I learned how to call customer service, schedule appointments, and handle workplace conversations, all in English, all with a racing heart. One evening after work, I sat at a small local cafe, practicing English by reading signs and listening to conversations around me. I remember watching people laugh, talk freely, and express opinions without hesitation. I wondered if I would ever reach that level of comfort. That question stayed in my mind longer than I expected. What I did not know at that moment was that this cafe, this quiet place where I practiced listening to strangers talk about coffee and weather, was about to become the setting for the most unexpected chapter of my life. Because soon, someone would walk into that space, carrying a completely different culture, a different life experience, and a presence that would slowly change how I saw language, love, and belonging. Sometimes, the first steps into a new life feel like walking through fog. You cannot see where the path leads. You only know you must keep moving. And occasionally, while you are busy trying to understand a menu or survive small talk, life quietly prepares to introduce someone who will change your entire story. Or to say it simply in English, sometimes you move to a new country for work, but your heart moves there for a reason you have not met yet. The moment we met. Have you ever noticed how the most important moments in life rarely look important at the beginning? They do not arrive with dramatic music or slow-motion lighting. They usually appear while you are distracted, tired, or simply trying to survive another normal day. The moment I met the person who would later become my partner started exactly like that, ordinary, quiet, and completely unexpected. It happened on a cold afternoon at the same small cafe where I often practiced listening to English conversations. By then, the cafe had become my unofficial language classroom. I liked sitting near the window, ordering the same drink, and pretending to read while secretly observing how Americans talked. Researchers in language immersion call this passive listening exposure. Your brain absorbs rhythm, tone, and pronunciation even when you are not actively studying. Basically, I was learning English by eavesdropping professionally. That afternoon, the cafe was crowded because a snowstorm had just started outside. People rushed in, shaking snow from their coats, ordering hot drinks like survival depended on caffeine. I was sitting with my notebook, writing one simple sentence about my day. Today feels quiet but heavy. Then I heard a voice behind me asking, "Is this seat taken?" The sentence was simple. clear, slow. But my brain still needed half a second to process it. I looked up and saw someone smiling politely, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a winter jacket covered with tiny snowflakes. I answered carefully, "No, you can sit." My accent felt louder than my words, but they did not react with confusion or impatience. They simply sat down and said, "Thank you." Sometimes conversations start with big topics. Ours started with something incredibly small. They noticed my notebook and asked, "Are you studying?" I hesitated, then replied, "Yes. I practice English by writing my daily story." I expected the conversation to end there. Instead, they looked curious and said, "That's actually a very smart way to learn." That sentence surprised me more than I expected. Positive feedback can strongly affect language learner confidence. According to educational psychology, encouragement activates dopamine release, which improves motivation and memory retention. In simple words, their compliment felt like my brain received an emotional energy drink. We started talking slowly. I learned that they were also connected to more than one culture. They had grown up in the United States but had family roots in another country. Suddenly, our conversation shifted from basic introductions to deeper topics about identity, belonging, and cultural expectations. It felt strange how quickly comfort replaced awkwardness. But our communication was not perfect. There were moments when I misunderstood words or paused too long searching for vocabulary. Instead of finishing my sentences or correcting me impatiently, they waited. That small behavior changed everything. Communication researchers explain that conversational patience builds psychological safety. When learners feel safe, they take more risks speaking, which accelerates language development. At one point, I tried to explain why winter made me feel emotionally distant. I said, "The weather makes my feelings feel smaller." It was not perfect English, but they understood. They responded by sharing how climate differences affected their own family traditions. That moment felt powerful because language stopped being about correctness and started becoming about connection. We talked about food, childhood memories, holiday traditions, and cultural misunderstandings. I learned that humor does not always translate easily between cultures. I made a joke that worked perfectly in my home country, but it landed awkwardly in English. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I laughed at myself, and surprisingly, they laughed too. Shared laughter created a bridge that vocabulary alone could not build. Psychologists often describe attraction as a combination of familiarity and novelty. We felt comfortable sharing emotional experiences, yet fascinated by each other's cultural differences. That balance created curiosity, which is one of the strongest emotional motivators in human relationships. Time moved strangely during that conversation. Snow continued falling outside, but inside the cafe, everything felt warm and calm. Eventually, they asked a simple question that I would later remember as a turning point. "Would you like to meet here again sometime?" My brain translated the sentence perfectly. My heart, however, required extra processing time. I answered yes, but inside, I felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Intercultural relationships often carry invisible complexity. Studies in cross-cultural psychology show that couples from different cultural backgrounds must negotiate communication styles, family expectations, and value systems more actively than couples from similar backgrounds. At that moment, I did not know any of that research. I only knew that meeting this person made me feel both understood and challenged. After we said goodbye, I walked home through falling snow with a strange emotional warmth. I replayed our conversation repeatedly in my mind, analyzing every sentence like a language student reviewing audio recordings. But I also noticed something new. For the first time since arriving in America, I was not practicing English because I had to. I wanted to. Motivation researchers describe intrinsic motivation as learning driven by personal emotional reward rather than external pressure. That meeting transformed English from a survival tool into a relationship tool. I wanted to communicate better, not for career success or social acceptance, but because I wanted to understand someone who suddenly felt important in my life. Over the following days, we continued exchanging messages. Our texts were simple, clear, and sometimes grammatically imperfect. But they were honest. And honesty has a strange way of making language feel alive. Looking back, I realized that our meeting did not feel dramatic because life rarely announces turning points clearly. It felt like a small conversation between two people escaping a snowstorm. But sometimes, destiny hides inside ordinary moments, waiting patiently for two strangers to start talking. And that day, without realizing it, I took the first step into a relationship that would challenge my language, my culture, my beliefs about love, and eventually make me ask the biggest question of my life. Can two people from completely different worlds truly build one shared home? Love growing through simple English. There is a strange moment in every relationship when emotions grow faster than vocabulary. Your heart wants to explain something deep, meaningful, and complicated, but your language skills are still learning how to tie their shoes. That was exactly where our relationship moved next, into a stage where feelings became stronger, conversations became longer, and English quietly became the bridge holding everything together. After several meetings at the cafe and short walks through quiet city streets, we started spending more time together in everyday situations. Daily life turned into our language classroom, and love slowly became our motivation teacher. Instead of scheduling formal study sessions, we practiced English naturally while cooking dinner, grocery shopping, or choosing movies to watch. Research in language immersion shows that contextual and emotional learning environments improve retention because the brain associates vocabulary with real experiences and emotional rewards. One afternoon, we decided to cook dinner together for the first time. The kitchen became a small battlefield between measurements, ingredients, and cultural cooking styles. I tried to explain how recipes in my home culture often rely on feeling rather than exact numbers. I said, we cook with memory, not measuring cups. My partner laughed gently and replied, in my family, we cook with instructions, not memory. That simple difference created a funny but meaningful cultural conversation. While preparing food, I had to describe ingredients and cooking steps in English. I used phrases like, add a little salt, or wait until it smells warm and sweet. These sentences were simple, but they forced me to practice sensory vocabulary, words connected to taste, smell, and texture. Cognitive linguistics research shows that sensory language strengthens neural associations because it connects abstract vocabulary to physical experiences. In other words, describing food helped my brain remember English faster than memorizing vocabulary lists ever could. Our communication style also started developing its own rhythm. We spoke slowly, paused naturally, and used eye contact more intentionally. Relationship psychologists often describe this as synchronized communication, where couples unconsciously adjust speaking speed and tone to match each other. That synchronization builds emotional comfort and increases mutual understanding. It also helped me feel less pressure to sound perfect. There were moments when I searched for words and simply could not find them. Instead of ending the conversation, I learned to use alternative communication tools. Sometimes I described a word using simpler words. Sometimes I used gestures. Sometimes I said, "I don't know the word, but I feel." That sentence structure became extremely helpful. Language education research confirms that paraphrasing improves fluency development because it trains the brain to stay in the target language rather than switching back to the native language. Humor unexpectedly became one of our strongest communication tools. One evening, I tried to tell a romantic story about missing someone, but I accidentally said, "I miss you like missing bus." The sentence sounded ridiculous, but we laughed for several minutes. Emotional memory studies suggest that humor activates dopamine and strengthens long-term learning pathways. That embarrassing mistake actually improved my understanding of metaphor and expression. Cultural learning also became part of our emotional connection. We shared music playlists from our childhoods, explained the meaning behind favorite songs, and translated lyrics together. Music helped me practice listening skills because songs often slow down emotional pronunciation patterns. Neuroscience research shows that rhythm and melody improve language acquisition by activating multiple brain regions simultaneously. Sometimes, we sang together even when I mispronounced half the lyrics. Those moments felt less like study sessions and more like shared emotional experiences. Differences in emotional expressions slowly appeared as well. In my cultural background, affection is often shown through actions, like cooking, helping, or remembering small details. In American culture, verbal affirmation plays a larger role. My partner often expressed feelings using direct sentences like, "I appreciate you," or "I enjoy spending time with you." At first, hearing direct emotional language felt unusual to me. But over time, I realized verbal expression strengthens relationship clarity. Relationship research shows that couples who regularly verbalize appreciation report higher emotional satisfaction and lower misunderstanding rates. Gradually, I began practicing emotional vocabulary. I started using phrases such as, "I feel grateful," or "I feel comfortable with you." These sentences were not complex, but they carried emotional honesty. Emotional transparency reduces relational anxiety because both partners understand each other's internal experiences more clearly. Language stopped being just communication. It became emotional architecture, building trust sentence by sentence. Listening skills improved significantly during this period. Because I genuinely wanted to understand my partner's experiences and cultural perspectives, I paid attention not only to words but also to tone, facial expressions, and pauses. Linguistic communication theory explains that over 60% of emotional meaning is transmitted through nonverbal signals. Paying attention to those signals improved my comprehension even when vocabulary remained limited. Weekend storytelling became our special tradition. We took turns sharing personal memories, childhood experiences, or meaningful life events. The rule remained simple: honesty mattered more than grammar accuracy. Sometimes I needed extra time to organize my thoughts. Sometimes I repeated sentences with slightly improved structure. These storytelling practices improved narrative fluency, which language acquisition experts identify as a key stage in achieving conversational confidence. One quiet evening, while sitting on a park bench watching city lights reflect on melting snow, our conversation became more serious. I admitted one of my hidden fears using very careful English. I said, "I worry our cultures are too different. Maybe relationships like this are very difficult long-term." Speaking that sentence felt like placing my vulnerability directly into the conversation. My partner listened patiently before responding slowly and thoughtfully. They said, "Differences don't create problems by themselves. Ignoring differences creates problems. Learning differences creates connection." That statement reshaped how I viewed cultural diversity in relationships. Cross-cultural relationship studies confirm that couples who treat cultural differences as learning opportunities develop stronger resilience and emotional adaptability. From that moment, our conversations became more intentional. We asked questions about traditions, family expectations, and future goals. English became the shared language where two cultural identities negotiated, learned, and adapted together. It was not always smooth or perfect, but it was honest and growing stronger each day. Looking back, I understand something important. Fluency does not always arrive before emotional connection. Sometimes emotional connection pulls fluency forward. When communication becomes meaningful, motivation becomes natural, and language transforms from academic knowledge into living expression. Because when two people truly want to understand each other, even simple English can carry complex emotions, build trust, and slowly create a shared world where differences become curiosity instead of distance. And while our conversations were becoming deeper and more comfortable, we were about to discover that language was only one layer of cultural difference. Climate, lifestyle habits, and daily routines across American regions were waiting quietly, ready to challenge our relationship in ways neither of us expected. Discovering cultural and climate contrasts. Snow can look romantic in movies, but real snow has a personality that tests patience, relationships, and even emotional stability. As our connection grew stronger, daily life in the United States began showing us that love is not only built through conversations and shared laughter. Sometimes, love is tested by weather forecasts, cultural habits, and the invisible routines people grow up believing are completely normal. Living in America exposed me to climate differences that felt surprisingly powerful in shaping lifestyle and emotional patterns. I had moved from a region where seasons changed gently, where warmth encouraged outdoor social gatherings, and where daily routines often included spontaneous visits with friends or family. In contrast, the Northern American state where I lived introduced long winters, shorter daylight hours, and a lifestyle that revolved more around indoor activities. Environmental psychology research confirms that climate strongly influences social behavior, emotional energy, and even communication styles. During winter, I noticed people planned social interactions more intentionally rather than spontaneously. Friends scheduled dinners weeks in advance. Social visits often required calendar invitations instead of casual drop-ins. At first, I misunderstood this as emotional distance. My partner explained that planning ahead was not about avoiding connection. It was about respecting personal time and logistical realities created by climate and work schedules. That explanation helped me realize how environmental conditions quietly shape cultural habits. Weather also influenced our relationship in emotional ways. On extremely cold days, my motivation dropped. I preferred staying inside, watching familiar content from my home country, and speaking my native language to feel comfort. Seasonal mood research shows that reduced sunlight exposure can decrease serotonin production, affecting mood and social motivation. My partner recognized these emotional changes before I fully understood them myself. One afternoon, I remember feeling unusually quiet and distant. My partner gently suggested we take a short walk outside despite the cold. I hesitated, convinced that freezing wind could not possibly improve my mood. Surprisingly, after 10 minutes of walking and talking slowly, I felt more energized. Scientific studies show that even brief outdoor exposure during winter can improve emotional regulation and cognitive performance. That walk became one of our small relationship rituals, using environment instead of fighting it. Climate differences also introduced practical lifestyle adjustments that required communication and compromise. Clothing choices became cultural discussions. I grew up believing that light jackets were sufficient for most weather. American winter demanded layers, insulated boots, gloves, and weather tracking apps that felt more complex than financial planning. My partner patiently explained temperature safety, wind chill concepts, and how ignoring weather warnings could create real health risks. Daily routines revealed deeper cultural contrasts as well. In my cultural background, meals often represent extended family bonding, where dining can last hours with storytelling and emotional sharing. In American work culture, weekday meals are frequently shorter and more functional due to busy schedules. At first, this difference created emotional misunderstanding. I interpreted shorter meals as reduced emotional connection. My partner explained that quality of time mattered more than length of time in many American households. Sociocultural research supports this idea. Different cultures measure relational closeness through different behavioral indicators. Some cultures emphasize duration of shared time, while others focus on focused attention and verbal affirmation. Learning this helped us design our own hybrid routine. On weekdays, we adapted to shorter, efficient meals. On weekends, we intentionally created longer dinners where storytelling, cultural food, and relaxed conversations became central relationship experiences. Geographic diversity within the United States also surprised me. Traveling together to different states exposed us to regional cultural differences that felt like visiting multiple countries within one nation. In southern states, communication styles felt warmer and more conversational with strangers. In large urban cities, interactions often appeared faster and more direct. Cultural anthropologists describe the U.S. as a microcultural landscape, where regional identity influences communication style, hospitality traditions, and social expectations. One trip to a warmer coastal state changed my emotional perspective completely. The sunlight, ocean air, and relaxed outdoor lifestyle reminded me of home in unexpected ways. During that trip, I felt more confident speaking English, more expressive in conversation, and emotionally lighter. Research in environmental mood theory suggests that familiar climate conditions can increase social confidence and communication fluency by reducing stress-related cognitive load. Our relationship also faced small conflicts caused by climate and lifestyle preferences. I loved warmer environments and outdoor evening walks. My partner felt comfortable in colder climates and preferred indoor activities during winter months. Instead of viewing these differences as incompatibility, we treated them as negotiation opportunities. Relationship conflict resolution studies emphasize that successful couples shift from win-lose thinking toward collaborative problem-solving. We started creating seasonal relationship traditions. During winter, we focused on indoor activities like cooking new cultural dishes, watching documentaries, and sharing storytelling sessions. During warmer months, we prioritized travel, outdoor exploration, and social gatherings with friends. This adaptive routine allowed us to respect both comfort zones while expanding our shared experiences. Language learning also evolved during these environmental transitions. Describing weather patterns, travel experiences, and emotional responses to climate helped expand my vocabulary in natural contexts. I learned expressions like the weather feels unpredictable, or sunlight changes my energy. Environmental vocabulary became emotional vocabulary, connecting language learning with personal experience. One evening, while watching snow slowly cover city streets from our apartment window, we talked about how climate influences identity. I said, in careful English, weather changes how people live, and maybe how they love. My partner nodded and responded, maybe love is learning to live in each other's seasons. That sentence stayed in my memory because it described our relationship perfectly. Looking back, I understand that climate and lifestyle differences were not obstacles but emotional training exercises. They taught us flexibility, patience, and curiosity. They showed us that relationships are not built in perfect conditions but in shared adaptation. Because when two people from different cultural environments choose to build one life together, they are not just sharing love. They are learning how to survive emotional winters and celebrate emotional summers, sometimes at the same time. And while climate and lifestyle differences were already teaching us valuable lessons, an even more complex challenge was quietly approaching. Soon, our relationship would expand beyond just two individuals and begin interacting with two completely different family traditions and cultural expectations, a test far more delicate than weather forecasts. When two families meet two worlds. Relationships often feel simple when they exist between two people. The real complexity begins when two families, two histories, and two cultural value systems step into the same emotional room. As our relationship became more serious, the idea of introducing each other to our families slowly transformed from an exciting milestone into a quiet source of anxiety neither of us wanted to admit openly. Family plays different roles across cultures, and I quickly realized that these differences influence expectations about love, marriage, and long-term commitment. In my cultural background, family approval often carries deep emotional weight. Decisions about relationships are rarely viewed as purely individual choices. They are connected to tradition, family reputation, and generational continuity. In American culture, individual choice tends to hold stronger importance, although family support still matters emotionally. Sociologists describe this contrast as collectivist versus individualist value orientation. And intercultural couples often experience tension when balancing these perspectives. The first step of introducing our relationship to my family happened through video calls because of geographic distance. Technology made communication possible but did not eliminate emotional pressure. I remember preparing for that call as if it were a job interview mixed with a cultural performance. I practiced English introductions with my partner and rehearsed translations in my native language with my family. Language switching created cognitive stress because my brain had to translate emotional nuance between two cultural frameworks simultaneously. When the call finally started, my family asked polite but direct questions about my partner's background, career, family values, and long-term intentions. Their tone was loving but protective. Cross-cultural family research shows that families from collectivist societies often view partner selection as a communal decision because marriage is seen as a union between families rather than only individuals. My partner responded respectfully, speaking slowly and showing genuine curiosity about my family's traditions. That patience reduced tension significantly. However, emotional misunderstandings still appeared. Some of my family members worried that cultural differences might create long-term conflict. Their concerns were not rejection but protective instinct. Intergenerational psychology explains that families often express fear as caution because they want to reduce potential emotional harm for their loved ones. Understanding this helped me respond calmly instead of defensively. Meeting my partner's family in the United States introduced a completely different emotional experience. Their communication style felt open, relaxed, and conversational. They encouraged personal storytelling and asked about my career goals, hobbies, and personal dreams. While this openness felt welcoming, it also felt unfamiliar. I was used to conversations that emphasized family responsibilities and cultural continuity rather than individual personal development. Language played a fascinating role during these interactions. I noticed that when discussing cultural traditions, My English became slower and more careful because I wanted to represent my heritage accurately. Cultural linguistics research suggests that people often experience identity sensitivity when explaining cultural values in a second language because they feel responsible for representing their entire cultural background. That emotional responsibility increased my motivation to speak clearly and respectfully. One particularly memorable moment happened during a shared family dinner. My partner's family prepared traditional American dishes, and I prepared food from my cultural background. The dinner table became a symbolic cultural exchange environment. Food anthropology studies highlight how shared meals function as cultural negotiation spaces, allowing families to experience unfamiliar traditions in emotionally safe environments. During dinner, conversations moved between humor, curiosity, and subtle cultural exploration. Some family members asked about wedding traditions in my culture. Others shared stories about their own family history and cultural evolution within the United States. These conversations revealed something important. American culture itself contains layers of immigrant histories, blended traditions, and evolving identities. That realization helped me feel less like an outsider and more like part of a continuously changing cultural mosaic. Despite positive interactions, emotional pressure still existed privately between my partner and me. We sometimes worried about meeting family expectations on both sides. Relationship psychology research describes this as dual family pressure, where intercultural couples must balance two sets of emotional loyalty without losing their own relationship identity. We learn to schedule honest conversations about our fears, expectations, and long-term goals. One evening, after visiting my partner's family, we sat quietly in the car discussing our feelings. I admitted, in careful English, I want both families to feel respected. Sometimes I worry I cannot do everything correctly. My partner responded thoughtfully, saying, "Respect does not mean perfection. It means effort and honesty." That sentence reduced emotional pressure more than any reassurance could. We began developing strategies to build family connection gradually. We shared cultural holiday traditions through photos and video calls. We explained cultural customs patiently instead of assuming immediate understanding. Cultural adaptation research emphasizes gradual exposure as a key factor in successful intercultural family integration. Emotional familiarity develops over time, not through single interactions. Another important lesson involved redefining the concept of tradition. Instead of choosing one cultural tradition over another, we started imagining how to create new traditions combining elements from both families. This concept aligns with family systems theory, which suggests that healthy families evolve by integrating new cultural and relational patterns rather than rigidly preserving old structures. Language learning continued evolving through these family interactions. Explaining cultural values required expanding my emotional vocabulary, learning diplomatic expressions, and improving storytelling fluency. Family conversations became advanced communication training environments disguised as emotional bonding experiences. Looking back, introducing families did not simply test our relationship. It expanded it. It required emotional diplomacy, cultural humility, and communication resilience. It also showed us that love between two people naturally grows into relationships between multiple generations, histories, and expectations. Because when two cultures meet through family connection, love transforms from private emotion into shared legacy. And while we were slowly building acceptance and understanding between families, we were about to face another challenge that no family tradition could fully prepare us for: misunderstandings caused by subtle communication. Differences that would test our patience, emotional maturity, and commitment to truly listening to each other. Sometimes families create the strongest support systems. Sometimes they create the most delicate emotional negotiations. And sometimes they teach two people that love is not only about choosing each other, it is about learning how to honor every word that shaped the person you choose. Misunderstandings that made love stronger. Misunderstandings rarely arrive as dramatic arguments. Most of the time, they enter relationships quietly, hiding inside small sentences, different tones of voice, or cultural habits that feel normal to one person but confusing to another. As our relationship deepened and families slowly became part of our shared story, we began facing communication challenges that were more emotional than linguistic. Ironically, these misunderstandings became some of the strongest lessons shaping our relationship. Cultural communication styles influenced how we expressed feelings, handled conflict, and interpreted silence. In my cultural background, emotional discomfort is sometimes communicated indirectly. People may avoid confrontation to protect harmony and preserve respect. In contrast, American communication culture often encourages direct expression of concerns as a way to resolve issues quickly. Cultural communication researchers describe this difference as high-context versus low-context communication systems. The first serious misunderstanding between us happened during a small conversation that seemed harmless at the beginning. My partner asked about future plans regarding where we might live long-term. I felt uncertain but did not want to create conflict or appear negative. Instead of expressing my hesitation clearly, I gave a vague response and changed the topic. I believed silence would prevent emotional tension. Unfortunately, silence created a different kind of tension. My partner interpreted my response as avoidance or lack of commitment. I interpreted their repeated questions as pressure. Neither of us intended to hurt the other, but emotional interpretation replaced actual communication. Relationship psychology studies show that intercultural couples often experience interpretive conflict, where the same behavior carries different emotional meanings depending on cultural background. The conversation eventually became emotionally uncomfortable. My partner said they felt confused and unsure about my feelings. I felt misunderstood and emotionally overwhelmed. Language anxiety returned temporarily because expressing complex emotions in English still required extra mental effort. Emotional linguistics research shows that second language speakers often experience reduced emotional vocabulary, making it harder to describe subtle feelings during conflict situations. That evening, we sat in silence for several minutes. Silence felt heavier than any argument. Instead of trying to win the conversation, we decided to pause and reflect individually. Conflict resolution theory emphasizes emotional cooling periods as essential for preventing defensive communication patterns. When emotional intensity decreases, cognitive clarity improves. Later, we return to the conversation with a different approach. I tried explaining my feelings using simpler but clearer English. I said, when I am unsure, I become quiet. In my culture, silence sometimes means I am thinking, not avoiding. Speaking that sentence felt vulnerable but necessary. My partner listened carefully and responded, in my experience, silence sometimes feels like emotional distance. I ask questions because I want clarity, not pressure. That exchange changed how we viewed communication differences. Cross-cultural relationship research confirms that misunderstandings often result from different emotional interpretation systems rather than lack of care or commitment. Recognizing this allowed us to replace blame with curiosity. We began creating communication agreements. One agreement involved asking clarification questions instead of making assumptions. For example, if one of us felt confused by silence, we would ask, "Are you thinking or feeling uncomfortable?" This simple strategy reflects active clarification techniques widely recommended in relationship counseling. Clarification prevents emotional storytelling, where individuals create negative interpretations without verifying intent. Another misunderstanding appeared around expressions of affection. I often expressed love through practical actions, such as preparing meals, organizing daily tasks, or remembering small personal preferences. My partner expressed affection through verbal affirmation and physical closeness. At times, we both felt emotionally unrecognized despite continuous caring behavior. Love language theory suggests that individuals experience emotional validation differently, and mismatched expression styles can create emotional invisibility. We decided to openly discuss how each of us recognized emotional care. That conversation required expanding emotional vocabulary in English. I practiced phrases like, when you say supportive words, I feel safe, and when I do helpful actions, it means I care deeply. Expressing emotional translation between love languages strengthened our relationship significantly. Humor continued playing an unexpected role during conflict resolution. During one minor argument about household responsibilities, I accidentally used the phrase, "I feel emotionally attacked by dirty dishes." The sentence sounded dramatic, but it broke tension immediately. Emotional humor research shows that shared laughter during conflict reduces cortisol levels and increases relational bonding hormones like oxytocin. Laughter reminded us that we were partners solving problems, not opponents trying to win. We also learned about cultural perceptions of time and planning. I sometimes preferred flexible scheduling based on emotional readiness or spontaneous opportunities. My partner preferred structured planning to reduce stress and maintain productivity. Time orientation studies identify this difference as polychronic versus monochronic cultural time perception. Recognizing this difference helped us design balanced routines combining scheduled commitments with flexible free time. Listening skills became our most valuable relationship tool. We practiced reflective listening, repeating each other's main points to confirm understanding. For example, one of us might say, I hear that you feel stressed when plans change suddenly. Is that correct? Communication psychology research demonstrates that reflective listening reduces conflict escalation and increases emotional validation. Language learning continued evolving through these emotional conversations. Expressing conflict required learning diplomatic vocabulary, emotional nuance, and tone sensitivity. These advanced communication skills improved not only our relationship but also my professional communication confidence. Emotional language complexity often represents higher fluency levels because it requires integrating vocabulary, cultural awareness, and empathy simultaneously. One particularly meaningful conversation happened after a misunderstanding involving holiday traditions. I worried about losing connection to my cultural celebrations, while my partner worried about balancing multiple family expectations. After long discussion, we decided to celebrate both traditions equally, even if it required creative scheduling and travel planning. Cultural integration theory suggests that hybrid traditions create stronger long-term relational satisfaction because they honor both identities simultaneously. Looking back, misunderstandings became unexpected teachers. They forced us to slow down communication, clarify emotional meanings, and expand our cultural awareness. They also revealed an important truth about relationships. Harmony does not mean absence of conflict. Harmony means developing skills to navigate conflict respectfully and honestly. Because love between different cultures is not built by avoiding misunderstandings. It is built by learning how to transform misunderstanding into deeper understanding, stronger trust, and emotional resilience. And just as we were becoming more confident in navigating emotional and cultural communication challenges, life introduced a new level of complexity: legal systems, government policies, and administrative procedures connected to marriage and residency in the United States. Challenges that required not only emotional strength but patience, organization, and unwavering teamwork. Sometimes misunderstandings feel like cracks in a relationship. But occasionally, those cracks allow deeper understanding to grow, turning fragile connection into something surprisingly unbreakable. Marriage, paperwork, and real-life pressure. Love stories often focus on emotions, romantic gestures, and unforgettable memories. Real-life commitment, however, introduces documents, deadlines, and official procedures that can test patience more than emotional disagreements ever could. As our relationship moved toward marriage, we discovered that love between different cultures does not only require emotional understanding. It also requires navigating legal systems, immigration policies, and bureaucratic processes that can feel overwhelming, confusing, and surprisingly emotional. Planning marriage in the United States introduced us to a world of paperwork that felt like learning a new language entirely. Legal vocabulary, administrative instructions, and government forms required careful attention to detail. Immigration law experts often describe intercultural marriage as both a romantic and legal partnership, where emotional commitment must align with institutional requirements. Each document required proof, evidence, and precise accuracy. Small mistakes could delay processes for months. At the beginning, the paperwork felt intimidating. Government forms included detailed questions about personal history, financial stability, and relationship authenticity. While answering these questions, I realized that official systems required us to translate our emotional relationship into structured documentation. That experience felt unusual. Love had grown through shared conversations, cultural exchange, and emotional trust. Now, we had to explain that connection through dates, addresses, and written statements. Stress research shows that administrative uncertainty can increase cortisol levels, especially when individuals fear losing control over important life decisions. We experienced that stress during moments when waiting for official responses or preparing interviews. Deadlines created pressure, and processing times often remained unpredictable. Uncertainty became an invisible third participant in our relationship. Language played a significant role during this stage. Although my English had improved through emotional and daily life conversations, legal terminology required a higher level of precision. Legal communication studies emphasize that administrative language often contains complex syntax and specialized vocabulary that even native speakers find challenging. Reading official instructions required patience, repeated review, and sometimes professional guidance. We developed a system for handling paperwork together. We scheduled weekly sessions where we reviewed documents, checked requirements, and organized files. Relationship teamwork research shows that collaborative problem-solving strengthens relational satisfaction because it reinforces partnership. Identity. Instead of viewing paperwork as an individual burden, we treated it as a shared mission. Emotional pressure occasionally appeared in unexpected ways. During one preparation session, I became overwhelmed by fear of making mistakes that could affect our future. I worried about language errors, document accuracy, and potential delays. I expressed my anxiety in simple English, saying, "I feel scared that one mistake can change everything." My partner responded calmly, "We are solving this together. One mistake is not stronger than teamwork." That reassurance reduced emotional tension immediately. Marriage preparation also introduced financial planning responsibilities. Wedding ceremonies, legal fees, travel costs, and living arrangements required careful budgeting. Financial stress is widely recognized in relationship psychology as a common conflict source for couples. Open financial communication became essential. We discussed expectations, responsibilities, and long-term planning transparently. These conversations strengthened trust and mutual accountability. Cultural expectations surrounding weddings also required negotiation. My cultural background often values extended family celebrations and symbolic rituals. American wedding traditions frequently emphasize personalization and flexibility. Cultural anthropology research explains that weddings represent social identity expression, reflecting values about family, community, and individual autonomy. We decided to design a ceremony blending both traditions. We included symbolic cultural elements representing my heritage while incorporating American ceremony structure. Planning this hybrid wedding required creativity, compromise, and detailed explanation to family members from both cultural backgrounds. The process itself became a cultural learning experience, teaching us how to respect tradition while embracing adaptation. Government interviews became one of the most emotionally intense parts of the process. During these interviews, officials evaluated relationship authenticity through detailed questions about shared life experiences, daily routines, and future plans. Answering these questions required emotional honesty and clear communication. Language anxiety returned temporarily because official environments often increase performance pressure. Performance psychology research confirms that high-stakes evaluation can temporarily reduce cognitive processing efficiency, especially in second language speakers. To prepare, we practiced answering potential questions through storytelling exercises. We described how we met, how our relationship developed, and how we handled cultural differences. These preparation sessions unexpectedly strengthened emotional reflection. Revisiting relationship memories reminded us why we were choosing this journey together. Waiting for official decisions tested our patience more than any paperwork. Immigration and legal processing times often involve long periods without updates. Uncertainty created emotional vulnerability. During these waiting periods, we focused on maintaining normal life routines, continuing work responsibilities, and strengthening emotional connection. Resilient psychology emphasizes maintaining routine as an effective strategy for managing uncertainty stress. Daily life continued presenting real-world pressure beyond administrative tasks. Balancing work responsibilities, relationship maintenance, family communication, and legal preparation required emotional discipline. We learned that strong relationships require structured time for emotional connection, not only logistical coordination. Language learning also evolved during this stage. Administrative processes expanded my professional vocabulary, improved reading comprehension, and increased confidence handling formal communication. Emotional conversations about future planning strengthened my ability to express long-term goals and complex fears in English. Legal preparation became advanced language training disguised as life preparation. One evening, after submitting a major application, we sat quietly discussing how far our relationship had traveled. I said slowly, "Love feels different when it becomes responsibility." My partner smiled and replied, "Love grows stronger when responsibility becomes shared." That conversation reflected our transformation from romantic partners into life partners navigating institutional systems together. Looking back, marriage preparation and legal challenges taught us that commitment is not only emotional promise. It is practical collaboration, emotional resilience, and continuous communication under pressure. Administrative systems tested our patience, but they also strengthened our teamwork, trust, and long-term vision. Because intercultural marriage does not only connect two hearts. It connects two legal identities, two family histories, and two future pathways that must learn to move forward together through structured systems and unpredictable challenges. And as official approvals slowly arrived and our marriage became legally recognized, a new chapter opened, not focused on survival or preparation, but on building daily married life within a multicultural home where traditions, habits, and dreams needed to coexist and grow together. Sometimes love begins with emotional connection. Sometimes it proves its strength while filling out forms at midnight, double-checking documents, and choosing patience over panic. Building our multicultural marriage life. Marriage changes the rhythm of life in subtle ways. The excitement of ceremonies and legal approvals slowly transforms into daily routines, shared responsibilities, and small habits that quietly define the strength of a relationship. When our married life officially began, we quickly realized that love was no longer just about emotional connection or overcoming cultural challenges. It became about building a shared home where two different cultural identities could live, grow, and support each other every single day. Our first apartment together became more than a living space. It became a cultural laboratory where traditions blended, routines evolved, and communication continued developing. Sociologists describe early marriage as a period of domestic identity formation, where couples negotiate daily habits, household roles, and long-term expectations. For intercultural couples, this process often includes balancing two cultural value systems while creating a unique third culture that belongs only to the relationship. One of the earliest adjustments involved household routines. In my cultural background, household responsibilities often follow traditional role expectations influenced by family structure and generational norms. In American society, household roles are frequently negotiated based on individual schedules, career demands, and personal preferences. Research in marital role flexibility shows that couples who openly discuss responsibilities rather than relying on cultural assumptions experience higher relationship satisfaction. We decided to create shared weekly planning conversations. Instead of assigning tasks automatically, we discussed work schedules, emotional energy levels, and practical needs. This open planning reduced misunderstanding and strengthened partnership equality. It also improved my English vocabulary related to household management, time coordination, and emotional expression about stress or fatigue. Food remained a powerful cultural connector inside our marriage. Cooking together became both emotional bonding and cultural preservation. We created a weekly routine where we alternated preparing meals representing each cultural background. Food anthropology studies emphasize that shared cooking activities reinforce cultural identity while encouraging cross-cultural appreciation. Preparing traditional dishes required storytelling, explaining ingredients, and sharing childhood memories connected to food traditions. Language learning continued evolving naturally within domestic life. Conversations about grocery planning, financial budgeting, and home organization expanded my practical English vocabulary. Domestic communication research highlights that routine household discussions create high-frequency language exposure, accelerating conversational fluency through repetition and emotional relevance. Speaking English during everyday decisions strengthened my confidence far more effectively than formal language study alone. Cultural celebration planning became another important part of our married life. Holidays from both backgrounds required creative scheduling and symbolic integration. For example, during traditional celebrations from my culture, we decorated our home with meaningful symbols and prepared traditional meals. During American holidays, we participated in community events, family gatherings, and local traditions. Cultural integration theory suggests that hybrid celebration practices strengthen identity balance and emotional belonging for intercultural families. Daily lifestyle habits also revealed subtle differences requiring adjustment. Time management preferences, social interaction styles, and relaxation routines sometimes reflected cultural conditioning. I occasionally preferred spontaneous weekend plans, while my partner often appreciated structured scheduling for efficiency. Relationship adaptation research emphasizes that successful couples develop flexible planning systems combining structure with spontaneity. We created monthly calendars including planned activities alongside designated free days, allowing emotional and social flexibility. Financial management became another important area of negotiation. Different cultural backgrounds sometimes influence attitudes towards saving, spending, and long-term investment. Financial transparency and regular budgeting discussions became essential. Relationship finance studies consistently identify open financial communication as a major predictor of long-term marital stability. These conversations improved not only our financial planning but also strengthened trust and accountability. Communication styles continued evolving as marriage introduced deeper emotional intimacy. Living together created opportunities for immediate feedback, emotional support, and conflict resolution. We practiced reflective listening techniques during disagreements, ensuring each person felt heard before problem-solving began. Communication psychology confirms that emotional validation reduces conflict escalation and strengthens relational security. One meaningful domestic tradition we developed involved weekly reflection conversations. Every Sunday evening, we discussed emotional highlights, challenges, and personal growth experiences from the past week. These conversations helped maintain emotional awareness and prevented unresolved tension from accumulating. Emotional check-in routines are widely recommended in marriage counseling as preventative communication strategies supporting long-term relationship. Health. Cultural identity balance remained an ongoing process. Sometimes I worried about gradually losing connection with my cultural roots while adapting to American life. My partner encouraged cultural preservation by learning traditional customs, participating in cultural celebrations, and supporting communication with my family. Cultural identity research shows that intercultural marriages succeed when both partners actively support heritage preservation alongside cultural adaptation. Social life expanded as we built friendships within diverse communities. The United States provided opportunities to connect with people from multiple cultural backgrounds, reinforcing the idea that multicultural identity is not unusual but increasingly common. Community integration studies demonstrate that social networks supporting cultural diversity increase emotional resilience for intercultural couples. Adjusting to new environments. Work-life balance also influenced our marriage dynamic. Career responsibilities occasionally created stress and reduced available time for relationship nurturing. We learned to schedule intentional quality time rather than relying on spontaneous availability. Relationship maintenance research highlights that deliberate shared activities strengthen emotional connection, particularly for couples managing demanding professional schedules. Language confidence reached a new level during this stage. Living within a bilingual emotional environment allowed me to switch between cultural expressions naturally. Code switching, alternating between languages depending on emotional context, is recognized by sociolinguists as a sign of advanced linguistic integration rather than confusion. This flexibility allowed me to express emotional nuance more effectively in both languages. One evening, while organizing our apartment and placing cultural decorations from both backgrounds side by side, we reflected on how our home represented our journey. I said quietly, "This place feels like two stories living together." My partner smiled and responded, "It's one story written in two languages." That sentence perfectly described our married life, a shared narrative built from diverse cultural chapters. Looking back, building multicultural marriage life required continuous negotiation, curiosity, and emotional generosity. It taught us that love grows strongest when daily routines reflect mutual respect, cultural appreciation, and open communication. Because marriage is not maintained by grand romantic gestures alone. It is built through shared grocery lists, quiet evening conversations, cultural holiday planning, and small supportive actions repeated consistently over time. And just as our home life became stable and emotionally fulfilling, another transformative chapter approached, one that would challenge our cultural understanding, communication strategies, and emotional teamwork in completely new ways. The possibility of raising children within two cultural identities began introducing questions we had never needed to answer before. Questions about language, tradition, identity, and the future of a family shaped by multiple worlds. Sometimes marriage begins with promises. Sometimes it becomes strongest through daily choices to build a home where differences are not erased but celebrated as part of a shared life story. Raising children between two cultures. The idea of raising children often arrives quietly, like a soft question that grows louder over time. One evening, while watching families play in a public park in the United States, we noticed how children ran freely between playground equipment, switching languages, laughing without worrying about identity or belonging. That moment planted a thought that felt both exciting and terrifying. Bringing a child into our multicultural marriage meant creating a new human being who would carry two cultural stories inside one life. When we first discussed becoming parents, our conversations quickly moved beyond typical parenting concerns. We began asking deeper questions about language, values, traditions, and identity formation. Developmental psychology explains that early childhood is the most sensitive period for cultural identity building. Children raised in multicultural households often develop higher cognitive flexibility, stronger social empathy, and advanced communication skills. But they may also experience confusion if cultural messages are inconsistent or conflicting. Our first major decision involved language exposure. Research in bilingual language acquisition strongly supports early dual language environments, showing that children exposed to multiple languages before age 5 develop stronger pronunciation, grammar intuition, and long-term cognitive benefits. We agreed that English would be our child's primary social language because of the environment in the United States. At the same time, Preserving my native cultural language remained emotionally important because language carries emotional heritage, family connection, and cultural identity. We developed a simple communication strategy. Inside the home, I would often speak my native language during emotional or storytelling moments, while my partner continued using English during daily practical communication. Language immersion studies show that consistent contextual language usage helps children naturally separate and understand multiple linguistic systems without confusion. This balanced exposure created a home where both languages felt natural rather than forced. Storytelling became one of our most powerful parenting tools. Every night, we created bedtime stories blending cultural myths, family memories, and fictional adventures. Narrative psychology research confirms that storytelling helps children construct identity frameworks and emotional security. Through storytelling, our child learned that cultural diversity was not something unusual but something beautiful and meaningful. Food traditions also played a central role in our parenting approach. We introduced traditional dishes from both cultures, allowing our child to associate taste with cultural storytelling. Childhood nutrition research shows that early exposure to diverse foods increases openness to new experiences and strengthens cultural acceptance. Preparing meals together became educational and emotional bonding time, filled with laughter, cultural explanations, and accidental kitchen disasters that later became family jokes. Cultural holiday celebrations required creative planning. We carefully introduced holidays from both cultural backgrounds without overwhelming our child. Cultural education specialists emphasize that children benefit from celebrating multiple traditions when each celebration is explained through storytelling, symbolism, and emotional connection rather than strict ritual obligation. Watching our child grow excited about decorating for multiple cultural holidays reassured us that multicultural identity could feel joyful rather than confusing. School life introduced new social dynamics. The American education system encouraged individuality, open discussion, and creative expression. Meanwhile, my cultural upbringing often emphasized respect for authority, discipline, and collective family honor. Parenting research highlights that multicultural families often blend these educational values, producing children who respect authority while maintaining independent thinking skills. Parent-teacher meetings sometimes became learning opportunities for us as well. We discussed how our child balanced cultural identity within school environments. Teachers often observed that children raised in multicultural families demonstrate strong adaptability and empathy toward classmates from diverse backgrounds. These observations confirmed psychological studies linking multicultural upbringing to increased emotional intelligence and social awareness. Emotional communication required careful attention as our child began asking questions about identity. Children in multicultural households often reach developmental stages where they wonder where they belong culturally. Instead of providing rigid definitions, we encouraged flexible identity thinking. Cultural identity research shows that children who understand identity as multi-layered develop stronger self-confidence and reduced cultural conflict. Anxiety. Family visits played an essential role in maintaining cultural connection. Traveling to visit relatives introduced our child to extended family traditions, social customs, and language immersion environments. Anthropological family studies emphasize that extended family exposure strengthens cultural continuity and emotional belonging. Watching our child interact with grandparents from different cultural backgrounds created emotional bridges across continents. Technology helped maintain cultural continuity as well. Video calls with relatives allowed our child to hear different accents, communication styles, and family storytelling traditions. Digital family connection studies confirm that virtual communication supports cultural preservation for families living across international boundaries. Parenting disagreements naturally appeared during this journey. Cultural differences sometimes influenced discipline methods, educational priorities, or emotional expression expectations. Instead of avoiding disagreement, we used collaborative parenting discussions. Family therapy research consistently shows that co-parenting communication reduces child behavioral stress and strengthens parental relationship. Satisfaction. One evening, our child asked a simple question while looking at family photos from different countries. The question sounded innocent but carried deep meaning. Which culture am I? That moment felt like standing at the intersection of our entire journey. I gently explained, you don't have to choose one. You are a bridge between both. Identity psychology supports this perspective, emphasizing that multicultural identity integration strengthens emotional resilience and global perspective development. Watching our child grow within two cultural worlds taught us that parenting is not about choosing which culture is stronger. It is about teaching children to carry multiple identities with confidence, curiosity, and emotional security. Multicultural parenting experts often describe this as raising global citizens capable of understanding diverse perspectives. Living in the United States provided access to multicultural communities where our child met friends from various cultural backgrounds. Community diversity research shows that children exposed to multicultural peer groups develop stronger tolerance, collaborative skills, and adaptive communication abilities. These environments reinforced the idea that cultural diversity is a strength rather than a challenge. Through this parenting journey, our marriage also deepened. Raising a child required emotional teamwork, patience, and long-term vision. Shared parenting strengthened our trust and reinforced our commitment to cultural integration within our family structure. Looking back, raising children between two cultures is not about balancing equal percentages of traditions or languages. It is about creating a stable emotional environment where cultural diversity becomes a source of pride and curiosity. Because children do not learn identity through lectures. They learn identity through daily observation, watching how parents respect each other's culture, communicate during disagreements, celebrate traditions, and express love across differences. And while our parenting journey strengthened our family bond, new challenges continued waiting ahead. As our child grew older, the complexity of cultural identity, social expectations, and generational differences began introducing emotional questions that required even deeper communication, patience, and understanding within our family life. Sometimes raising children across cultures feels like guiding a small boat across two oceans at the same time. But when navigation is guided by love, respect, and open communication, that journey becomes an extraordinary adventure rather than a frightening challenge. Facing family and cultural acceptance challenges. Not every love story receives instant applause from family members or cultural communities. Some relationships must walk through silence, hesitation, and quiet resistance before reaching acceptance. After building our marriage and raising children within two cultures, we believed the hardest challenges were behind us. Life, however, had another chapter waiting, one that tested emotional strength, patience, and our ability to protect love while respecting family traditions. Family approval carries deep emotional significance in many cultures. Sociologists explain that family acceptance reinforces relationship stability and personal identity validation. When intercultural marriages form, families sometimes struggle with fear of cultural loss, language barriers, or misunderstanding of foreign traditions. These reactions rarely come from rejection alone. They often emerge from protective instincts shaped by generational values and unfamiliar cultural experiences. The first signs of hesitation appeared during extended family gatherings. Conversations occasionally became cautious, with subtle questions about our parenting choices, language decisions, and long-term cultural identity plans for our children. These moments were rarely aggressive but carried emotional tension beneath polite smiles. Cultural psychology research describes this phenomenon as indirect resistance, where families express concern through questioning rather than confrontation. At times, I felt pressure to represent my culture perfectly, as if my behavior would influence how my entire cultural background was perceived. Identity representation stress is common among immigrants and intercultural partners. Studies show that individuals navigating multicultural environments often experience performance pressure to maintain cultural authenticity while adapting to new environments. This emotional burden can create self-doubt and anxiety about cultural belonging. My partner faced similar challenges from their own extended family. Some relatives worried about cultural compatibility, communication barriers, and potential long-term misunderstandings within our marriage. Family systems theory explains that when a family member forms a relationship outside traditional expectations, the entire family structure must adjust. Adjustment often triggers uncertainty, which may temporarily appear as emotional distance or skepticism. Instead of responding defensively, we chose gradual emotional education through shared experiences. We invited family members to participate in cultural celebrations, meals, and storytelling sessions that naturally introduced traditions without formal explanation. Cultural immersion research shows that experiential exposure significantly reduces cultural prejudice and increases emotional familiarity. One meaningful moment occurred during a family holiday gathering. We prepared a traditional dish from my cultural background while explaining its historical significance and emotional meaning. Watching relatives taste unfamiliar food while listening to family stories created unexpected emotional connection. Anthropological studies emphasize that food-sharing rituals often function as cultural bridges because sensory experiences create emotional memory stronger than verbal explanations. Language barriers sometimes created communication frustration between extended family members. To reduce this gap, we introduced simple bilingual phrases during family gatherings. Communication adaptation theory suggests that small language sharing efforts increase empathy and reduce social distance between cultural groups. Teaching relatives simple greetings and cultural expressions created laughter and curiosity rather than discomfort. Parenting decisions also required explanation to extended families. Multicultural parenting sometimes challenges traditional discipline expectations, educational priorities, and cultural identity teaching methods. Family education research recommends transparent communication about parenting philosophy while respectfully acknowledging traditional values. We shared psychological research about bilingual development, emotional validation parenting methods, and multicultural identity benefits to reassure concerned relatives. Emotional vulnerability became one of our strongest tools during this period. Instead of presenting ourselves as perfectly balanced multicultural parents, we shared our struggles openly. Relationship counseling studies consistently show that vulnerability encourages empathy and reduces defensive reactions within family conflicts. When relatives understood that we were also learning and adjusting, resistance slowly softened into curiosity. Community support played an important role as well. Connecting with other intercultural families allowed us to share experiences, advice, and emotional encouragement. Social support network research highlights that individuals facing cultural integration challenges experience improved emotional resilience when connected to similar experiences. These friendships provided reassurance that our challenges were normal rather than personal failures. Time became one of the most powerful healing factors. Cultural acceptance rarely happens instantly. Generational perspective studies show that family acceptance often develops gradually through repeated exposure, shared memories, and emotional bonding experiences. Over time, relatives began focusing less on cultural differences and more on shared family joy, especially through connection with our child. One unforgettable moment happened during a family visit when an older relative quietly approached me after watching our child switch comfortably between languages while playing with cousins. The relative smiled warmly and said, "Your family brings two worlds together beautifully." That simple sentence felt like emotional sunlight after years of cloudy uncertainty. It confirmed that acceptance had grown naturally through shared love and observation rather than forced persuasion. Through this journey, I learned that cultural acceptance is rarely about winning arguments or proving cultural superiority. It is about patiently allowing love, consistency, and shared experiences to slowly rewrite emotional perceptions. Cultural integration psychology emphasizes that long-term exposure to positive intercultural relationships reduces fear-based resistance and strengthens family unity. Our marriage also strengthened during this challenge. Facing external pressure required emotional teamwork and mutual reassurance. Relationship resilience studies show that couples facing external challenges often develop deeper emotional intimacy when they support each other. consistently. Every conversation defending our family values strengthened our trust and partnership. Looking back, family acceptance challenges taught us emotional patience, communication maturity, and cultural empathy. They reminded us that love stories involving multiple cultures often travel longer emotional distances before reaching harmony. That longer journey, however, frequently creates deeper understanding and stronger relational roots. Because family acceptance is not simply about agreement. It is about building emotional safety where cultural differences become respected parts of shared family identity rather than sources of division. As acceptance gradually replaced hesitation, our family life entered a new stage of stability and emotional harmony. Yet every long journey eventually invites reflection. Living, loving, parenting, and integrating cultures within the United States began inspiring deeper thoughts about identity, belonging, and the true meaning of love that crosses borders. These reflections slowly shaped the final chapter of our story, one focused not on overcoming challenges, but on understanding what this entire journey had truly taught us. Sometimes acceptance does not arrive through explanation. It arrives quietly through years of shared laughter, family meals, and watching love remain steady when cultural waves attempt to shake it. What love across cultures truly taught me. Standing inside our home today feels very different from the uncertain moments when this journey first began. The walls now hold family photos from different continents, holiday decorations from multiple traditions, and the joyful noise of a child who naturally moves between languages as if cultural borders never existed. Looking back at everything we experienced, adapting to American life, learning English through daily conversations, building marriage across cultures, raising children between traditions, and gaining family acceptance, one powerful realization slowly became clear. Love across cultures is not just about romance. It is about transformation. When I first arrived in the United States, I believed success meant learning English perfectly, adapting quickly, and proving that I could survive in a new country. Over time, I discovered that real success was learning how to live emotionally between cultures without losing identity. Cultural adaptation psychology describes this process as identity integration, where individuals develop the ability to belong to multiple cultural environments simultaneously without internal conflict. Language became one of the greatest teachers in this transformation. Learning English through real-life conversations, emotional moments, and family interactions allowed me to understand not only vocabulary but also emotional expression patterns in American culture. Linguistic research consistently shows that language shapes thought patterns and emotional communication styles. As my English improved, I noticed changes in how I expressed affection, resolved conflict, and communicated personal boundaries. At the same time, maintaining connection with my cultural roots strengthened emotional balance. Cultural preservation research emphasizes that individuals who remain connected to their heritage culture experience stronger psychological stability and self-confidence while adapting to new environments. Instead of choosing one identity over another, I learned that identity can expand rather than divide. Marriage across cultures also redefined my understanding of partnership. Love stopped being just emotional attraction or romantic excitement. It became daily cooperation, emotional negotiation, and cultural curiosity. Relationship science confirms that intercultural marriages often develop stronger communication skills because partners cannot rely on cultural assumptions. Every value, habit, and expectation must be discussed openly, which increases emotional transparency and long-term relationship satisfaction. Raising children between cultures became the most profound learning experience of all. Watching our child develop confidence in multiple languages and cultural traditions showed me that cultural diversity can become a powerful strength when supported by emotional security. Developmental psychology studies show that children raised in multicultural environments often demonstrate stronger adaptability, empathy, and global awareness compared to children raised within single cultural frameworks. Life in the United States also reshaped my understanding of independence and community. American society emphasizes personal freedom, individual responsibility, and open self-expression. Meanwhile, my cultural background taught me the importance of family loyalty, respect for elders, and collective emotional support. Blending these values created a balanced lifestyle where independence coexists with strong family connection. Sociological integration research identifies this balanced cultural perspective as bicultural competence, which allows individuals to adapt flexibly to diverse social environments. Another lesson came from facing challenges and moments of doubt. Immigration stress, language struggles, cultural misunderstandings, and family acceptance concerns sometimes created emotional exhaustion. Resilience psychology explains that overcoming cross-cultural challenges strengthens emotional endurance and problem-solving skills. Every obstacle we faced became part of our relationship foundation, reinforcing trust and emotional teamwork. One quiet evening recently, while organizing family documents and old travel photos, I found pictures from my first days in the United States. The person in those photos looked excited but uncertain, hopeful but slightly afraid. Comparing those memories with my present life created a deep sense of gratitude. Growth rarely feels dramatic while it happens. It appears slowly, through daily conversations, shared responsibilities, and emotional adjustments that eventually shape a completely new life story. Love across cultures also changed how I understand belonging. Belonging is not always connected to geography or nationality. Emotional belonging grows where people feel respected, understood, and supported. Cross-cultural identity studies confirm that emotional belonging often becomes stronger in multicultural families because members learn to appreciate diversity as part of family identity. Through this entire journey, storytelling remained a powerful learning method. Sharing personal experiences in simple English conversations allowed me to improve language skills while building emotional connection with listeners. Educational psychology research supports story-based language learning because emotional storytelling activates memory retention and listening comprehension more effectively than traditional memorization methods. That is why sharing real-life love stories can become one of the most natural ways to practice English communication. If there is one message this journey continues teaching me, it is that love does not erase cultural differences. Real love learns how to understand, respect, and celebrate those differences. Borders exist on maps, but emotional connection creates bridges that allow people to walk across those borders together. Sometimes people believe that intercultural relationships are more complicated than traditional relationships. In many ways, they are. But complexity often creates deeper understanding. When two people from different cultural backgrounds choose to build a life together, they do not just create a relationship. They create a living example of global connection, emotional cooperation, and cultural harmony. Today, when I look at our family laughing together during cultural celebrations, switching languages naturally during conversations, and supporting each other through everyday challenges, I no longer see cultural differences as obstacles. I see them as colors that make our life story richer and more meaningful. Love that crosses cultural borders teaches patience, humility, curiosity, and emotional courage. It teaches that identity is not something that must be protected from change, but something that can grow stronger through shared experiences. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches that understanding another culture always begins with listening, not just listening to language, but listening to emotions, values, and stories that shape another person's world. Because sometimes the greatest journeys are not about traveling between countries. They are about learning how two hearts from different cultures can create one shared home filled with respect, laughter, and unconditional support. As this story closes, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Love does not ask where you were born, what language you speak first, or how different your traditions may be. Love simply asks one brave question: are you willing to grow together? This journey of building a life, learning real English through real emotions, and creating a multicultural family in the United States was never perfect. There were confusing conversations, cultural misunderstandings, homesick nights, and moments when giving up felt easier than continuing. But every challenge became a hidden English lesson, every emotional conversation became listening practice, and every cultural difference became a bridge instead of a wall. If you are learning English and sometimes feel stuck, remember this: language is not just grammar rules or vocabulary lists. Language is connection. Language is storytelling. Language is how hearts from different countries understand each other without fear. And maybe, somewhere in your own life, you are standing at a border too. Maybe your border is language. Maybe it is culture. Maybe it is confidence. But borders are not always meant to stop you. Sometimes they are invitations to discover who you can become when you step across them. On this channel, you will continue discovering real English story practice, slow and easy listening stories, emotional storytelling, and real-life conversations that help you improve your English listening, speaking, and reading skills naturally, while also exploring love, life, culture, and personal growth in the United States and around the world. If this story touched you, helped you relax while learning English, or made you believe that connection can cross any border, save this video. Share it with someone learning English, and write in the comments where you are learning English from. Your story might inspire someone else who feels alone in their journey. And if you want more powerful, emotional, slow, and easy English story lessons designed for real-life understanding, Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story waiting for you. Because the next story might not just improve your English. It might change the way you see the world. Or even change the way you see your own life. Journey. See you in the next story.